Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Microsoft Excel. Today, I want to do a pretty simple exercise with a function called concatenate. Um, this is a very useful function, and you may have actually found yourself needing it in the past, but didn't actually know it existed. So when we think about Excel formulas, we tend to think of them in terms of mathematical equations, mathematical calculations. So, for example, in our library classes, we've done adding, multiplying, and averaging. Okay, but in Excel, you can also apply formulas to not only number data, but also text data as well. So the one that I want to show you is again called concatenate, and that means joining multiple things into one. So if we're looking at this data range here, we see that we have our sales organized by region. So we have column C has each sales region listed, and for each of those regions, there's a specific salesperson assigned to that region. So we have a last name column and a first name column. And then on the right here, each of those salespersons has their own number of orders and their total sales for the year 2020. Now, the way this has been organized is that the last names and the first names are separated. Okay, they're each in separate columns. And that's not always the most helpful way to organize data like this, especially with names. That's because whenever we're referring to a specific person, we're going to use their last name as their unique identifier. So what that means is with the first name separated in their own column, they're pretty much meaningless, okay? Because they're not technically attached to the last name. And what that means is down the road, if we somehow reorganize or resort our data, we could potentially sort of almost corrupt it, because the first name values might get separated from the last names. They might get mismatched, and then we lose track of that information. So it would probably be better to combine the last names and the first names into one column. And we're going to do that, again, using a function called concatenate. You don't need to create a column and then put all that information in manually. We don't need to transfer it over like that. We could just use a formula to combine them automatically. So the first thing I need to do, of course, is to create a new column in which I can put the combined values. So I'm going to put that to the left of column A. So if you remember that in Excel, when we insert a new column, it's going to go to the left of the column that is currently selected. So that means I need to select a cell from column A. And so I'm just going to select cell A1 here. I'm going to go up to the Home tab, go over here to the Cells group, click on the Insert dropdown, and then click on Insert Sheet Columns. And now I have a new column A. So a few things I want to do before I set up my formula. Of course, I want to give this a column label. So A1 is already selected, so all I have to do is go to my keyboard and type in name. All right, I'm just going to press Enter to save that information in there. And then I'm going to just go back and click on A1 again, because I just want to format a few things before I get moving. So if you look at our other column labels here, we see that they're in bold font and they're also centered. So I'm going to do the same thing to name here. So A1 is already selected, so I'm going to go up to the Home tab, go to the Font group, and click on the B for bold. Go over to the Alignment group and click on Center Alignment. And now it's in bold and it's centered just like the rest. The last thing I want to do is, most likely when I combine the last names and first names into one column, the current column width will not be wide enough to fit all that data. So I'm just going to open it up beforehand. So I'm going to go up to the column headers between A and B. There's my two-way arrow. I'm just going to click and drag to the right and open up column A a decent amount and let go. Okay, and that should be good. Remember that if it still doesn't quite fit, we can always adjust it later. So now my column is all set, and now I can go ahead and input my formula. So just as we typically do with formulas, I'm going to click in the cell where I need the first answer to go. So in this case, that's going to be A2. Now I'm going to go up to the Formulas tab here. And this is where you can find all the different functions available in Excel. And I see there's a function library group right here, and they're organized by category types, or excuse me, by categories. Since we're dealing with text, I'm going to click on the text dropdown. And here we have a number of functions, and there's concatenate right there. So I'm going to click on that. and it's going to launch a dialog box. Now, for many different functions in Excel, when you have more complicated ones, Excel kind of guides you through the process. It gives you this builder that allows you to build the formula piece by piece. So you don't have to know the exact syntax ahead of time. But also notice that if you look up in your formula bar, it's going to show you the beginning of that particular Excel syntax for that formula. And as we build it in here in the dialog box, you're going to see it in the formula bar. So right here it says text 1, and there's a text box. So here's where I'm going to input my first cell reference. So I look over, I see the first thing I need. Since I'm doing last name first, it's going to be cell B2. So I'm just going to type in B2. And if you look to the right, you'll see it shows you the specific value as a double check to make sure you put in the right one. Now I'm going to go down to text 2. Now I could put in my next cell reference, which would be the first name, cell C2. Okay, however, that would put the two values right up against each other. So perhaps I want some kind of space in between the two values just to make it easier to read. Okay, so when we do that, that's called a delimiter, and it's basically putting in special characters that are going to separate your two values. So I'm going to put in a comma and a space. Because remember, space is considered a character. So what this means is that once this is all done, you're going to have a last name, a comma, a space, and then a first name. So now I'm going to go down to text 3. And here is where I will put in my next cell reference of C2. And there it is again as a double check. Now all I need to do is go down here, click OK. And now look in cell A2, and we see that we have in fact combined the value from cell B2 and this value from cell C2. And there's a comma and space in the middle. Okay, now just as we've typically done with formulas, we don't need to apply the formula to each and every row. All we need to do is use our fill handle to apply it across the board. So I'm going to the bottom right of cell A2. There's my little black plus sign, that's the fill handle. I'm going to click and drag down to A33 and let go. And as you can see, it went through each and every row and combined the values from column B and column C. I'm just going to scroll back up here to the top. Okay, now we're not quite out of the woods yet, because presumably I'm going to want to delete columns B and C now because they're unnecessary. Because column A is doing that work for us, is keeping track of that for us. So let's see what happens when I delete columns B and C. I'm going to click right on the column header where it says B, and that will select the entire column. Now I'm just going to click and drag over to C, and that will select column C as well. Now I'm going to go back to the Home tab, come over here to the Cells group, click on the Delete drop-down, and then click on Delete Sheet Columns. And let's see what happens. Okay, it deleted those two columns. However, look at column A. All of that data has been corrupted. Okay, so let's undo this and see why. So I'm going to go up to the Quick Access toolbar up here, find the left turning arrow, that's the undo button. I'm going to click on that and get back to where we were. Now, let me click on cell A2, and let's see what's going on here. Okay, if you look up in the formula bar, remember, what we have in A2 is not actually a fixed value. It's actually a formula going on behind the scenes. So what that means is any values in column A are dependent upon anything in columns B and C, because the values in column A are referring to these values here. Okay, so in other words, if I get rid of columns B and C, column A can't exist. So what that means is I need to convert the values in column A from formula values to fixed text values, just like normal text. So we can do that with a copy and paste. So the first thing I need to do is select all the values that I need to convert. So I'm going to select cells A2 through A33. So there's the big white plus sign, that's your select cursor. I'm going to click and drag down to A33. And there we go, I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Now that I've selected all of those, I can go ahead to my clipboard group here and click copy. And you'll notice this green dashed line pops up. It's like a selection box just to let you know of the ones you've copied. Now, when I paste, I'm going to paste right over the existing values. So I don't need to enter a new column or anything like that. It's just going to paste right over it. So all I need to do now is paste. However, we can't do a normal paste. We need to do what's called a paste special. So I'm going to click on the drop down here, and I see a number of different paste options, and you'll see a category for paste values. And the very first one will have a 1, 2, 3. If you point at it, it will say values. Just click on that. And now I'm going to double click outside of that box just to get rid of that dashed line. And then I'll go back and click on A2. Now, let me look up here in my formula bar. There's no longer a formula, just the actual text values. So we've converted it from a formula to a fixed value, which is exactly what we needed to do. Now that I've done that, it's no longer dependent on columns B and C, so I can delete those. So I'm going to click on the column B header, click and drag over to the C header. So now columns B and C are selected in their entirety. I can go to the Home tab, over here to the Cells group, click on the Delete dropdown, click on Delete Sheet Columns. Now those two columns are gone. However, column A is still intact. So I've successfully used the concatenate function to combine two text values from two separate columns into one. Okay, so now my data range is all set. So I hope you found that useful, and good luck if you try this on your own. Thanks for watching, and as always, take care.